All right. What's up, everybody? This is Ryan here. It's 6 a.m. on October 18th. I'm feeling pretty good. I ended up completely forgetting to do a live stream on Monday. I think the reason for that was, for starters, last week I actually took the week off as sort of a vacation, and then so I was kind of out of the swing of things. And then also on Monday morning, my partner had to travel to basically an island near our city. We live in Vancouver, and so she had to get up really early to do that, and so did I. So I basically got sidetracked. So completely missed the Monday live stream on Twitch. Not a big deal, because I'm pretty sure last time I did that live stream, I don't think I got any viewers, because Twitch is still pretty slow, which isn't really a big surprise. So anyways, I thought, well, I might as well try and do some live streaming on Wednesday. I hope today's Wednesday, pretty sure. So, what can I say? Let me just resize my face a little bit here. So, yeah, it was a good vacation. Since there's no questions, I'll ramble about personal stuff. It was a really good vacation. I pretty much spent most of my vacation doing a lot of meditation and relaxing and stuff like that. I was a little bit burnt out after the feature release that happened just prior to the vacation that I took. It was only a week-long vacation. But yeah, my team released a big feature, and I was spearheading the Android client part of that feature. It was basically adding dark mode to an application. And yeah, it took quite a while, and it was an interesting process. And towards the end of it, I got a little tired and stressed out, because deadlines are fun. So yeah, it was just really good to take a week off, and I actually get quite a bit of time off for the rest of the year. So I get another week off in November, and then I get 2 weeks off in December. So for the remaining, whatever, 2.5 months of the year, I've got some time off coming up, which is really nice, because it's been a busy frickin' year. I mean, what with my team getting laid off at the start of the year, getting my new job, and then moving to a different province, it's just been a lot. So, anyways, yeah. Trying to think of what else to ramble about. Also, I don't know, I can ramble about some Android specific stuff. So let me actually just jump in here. So Android supporting Android 14 has been tricky for the application I've been working on, and my team has. It's been a tough one. It actually kind of reminds me of I think it was Android 26 that like totally bricked a couple of my applications. But yeah, it's been a tough one for supporting. So I figure I might as well ramble a little bit about the things that I've had to do. So foreground services got broken. So they need I think it's like called a foreground service type or something like that. So you need to add some stuff to the manifest. It's actually a pretty easy fix. And then we had a key library, like arguably the most important library in the whole app, that had some, what do you call those? Send broadcast? Android 14. Broadcast context? I'm trying to remember exactly what the It was like send broadcast or something like that. But basically, we had a key library that had some code which was crashing immediately due to I wish I could remember it now. So Android 14. Let me just go through the so let's just go Android 14 migration. This is the actual documentation here. Let's see. They should have a list somewhere, I think. Tester. Oh, one of my cats is eating something. God knows what it is. Behavior changes. Here we go. I think this is what I'm looking for. Yeah, so we had one of these contexts. We had a registered broadcast, which we had a broadcast that wasn't properly registered for that. So basically, broadcasts not being registered. I think they have to be registered is what it is. And then what else did we have? There was other things that broke in the app. So there was 3 core ones that broke. Anyways, then what I dealt with last night is non-SDK interfaces. So this was a fun one. So I basically had to go through the whole app and look for, this isn't exact, oh, here we go, yeah. Restricted non-SDK interfaces. This was really fun. So you can jump in here and then you'll get this gigantic file with 600,000 interesting. I'm not sure why that opened up in VS Code for me. But yeah, it's basically, it's like this giant CSV file with 600,000 API calls that are non-SDK interfaces. And so I had to, using strict mode, so I had to load the app with strict mode, detecting any non-SDK interfaces, log them, then compare them against this gigantic CSV file. So there's probably a more efficient way of like doing this or automating it, but yeah, I basically had to go through that gigantic file and check all of these different function calls that were going on. So that was real fun. And then I still have other things we had to like update safety, user data safety. I'll just say stuff. Not that we do anything unsafe with user data. So basically, this is just the rolling list of things that we've had to work on to support Android 14. And then one of the most annoying things for me personally is that, so my day-to-day Android device is just a Pixel 4a, and it's like the last Pixel device, the youngest Pixel device, I guess I could say, which doesn't support Android 14. And I also have a Samsung test device, which the company provided me with, and it also only goes up to Android 33 or Android 13. So that's been real fun. So I'm going to have to get my company to send me a new test phone probably. So anyways, yeah, point being, Android 14 has been a tricky release, certainly for the app that I've been working on. All right, we needed, there was one more thing which had to do with like, I had to ensure we weren't using non-dismissible foreground, I think just notifications, which luckily we weren't. So anyways, it's been taking a while, and it was kind of a funny discussion with my project manager, which was sort of like, my team the Android team, we got the work done on the dark mode feature, and then the project manager was kind of like, well, can we possibly support Android 14 in the same release? And I kind of had to go, well, I think that's a terrible idea. Like, I put it more tactfully than that, but like, no. we are not going to bump up the compile SDK version and release the app with minimal fixes and changes, and quite possibly drive our crash rate up substantially, just due to unforeseen issues. So anyways, yeah, that's pretty much what my work week back from vacation has been, is just looking into and fixing these various things. Luckily, a lot of these things that were broken aren't actually big issues. So, yeah, it wasn't too big of a deal. Anyways, so yeah, it looks like it could be a pretty slow day for Q&A, which is all right. What I'll do is I'll stick around for probably another 15 minutes, and if we don't get anything, then I'll just call it, friendo. So yeah, I guess so. One other interesting thing I can ramble about is I am trying to lead a review of our main client's apps architecture. So I can't go into super specific details, but our company's main client, their Android app, one of their main ones anyways, has an architecture which was introduced by a team of contractors from a couple years ago. And we have had to kind of deal with what's the word I'm looking for? We've had to kind of, in many cases, work around and patch the architecture that they used. And I've been kind of, you could say complaining about it, but pointing out things that I thought were not optimal with various team members. Hemantas, you use clean architecture. I don't know what that even means. I don't know what clean architecture means. And believe me, I've heard a lot of definitions of clean architecture, and I still don't know what people mean when they say that. But yeah, you could call it a clean architecture. It has some of the hallmarks of clean architecture in the pejorative sense. But yeah, like, I'll give you one piece of the puzzle. The app has the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Abstract presentation layer I have ever seen. Like, we're talking interfaces, interfaces used as namespaces, abstract classes depending on abstract classes. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's the most abstract presentation layer I've ever seen. And I've done, like, back in 2017, I used to be really into abstraction. I was one of those people who did that. And it also has, like, I think 7 modules or Gradle subprojects. So it's like, yeah. So anyways, I'm trying to lead a review of it. And the way I'm approaching that review is, yeah, there's some things about it which I find really, really annoying, but I'm trying to review it in the most objective way possible. And one of the most important things there is recognizing what are the benefits of the architecture. So doing basically pros and cons, or I phrased it as the good and the not so good. Because I think it's important. Suppose you want to review an entire architecture for an application and you have your ideas about how you could do it better. It's important to not approach things from like a I'm just gonna, fix everything and I know what's best. Like the way that I'm doing it is I started with documentation. I've been documenting the architecture using, I really like, this is not the architecture, but I love Excalidraw. It's one of my favorite little web tools here. And by the way, if you ever interview at Meta, or I'm not sure if Google uses it, but possibly Meta does, but it's useful to know how to use one of these things in case you have to do a systems design interview. Anyways, I jumped in here and sort of threw together documentation for the whole architecture, and then I threw that in a Notion page, which our company likes to use, and then started writing it like, what are the main principles of the architecture? So one of those principles was like, it's very, very abstract. What are the benefits of having it so abstract? What are the problems with having it so abstract? And so, yeah. And then once I had like the bones of those opinions, I presented it to the team, anyone who's worked on the Android app, which is about 4 people. And I said to them, hey, I would like you to read this document, and anything you would like to comment on or change or completely disagree with, I want to hear your opinions. And I tried really hard to present it in that way because I have some very strong opinions about software architecture, and I think I'm pretty good at it. It's one of my favorite topics in programming, and I've been studying programming for about 10 years. But some of the people I worked with have been working on like enterprise level applications for longer than I have been programming. So it's important that I don't go into this situation with like, I know exactly what's wrong and how to fix it. If there's something that a person disagrees with and they can prove me wrong, that is great. I want that to happen. So it's really important when you're working with a team in particular, like, don't let your ego get in the way of improving the quality of the product. And furthermore, if someone proves you wrong, hopefully they do it politely. And I know with my team, they will do it politely because they're nice people. I don't work with assholes. But if you are proven wrong, you're smarter as a result of it. So don't look at it as a bad thing and just kind of let go of your ego. So anyways, but yeah, it's interesting. The results of the architecture is, there's abstract classes depending on abstract classes. There's what I've taken to calling event-driven ping pong between the view and the view model. It's this funny thing where the view sends a message to the view model, and then the view model, an event like a sealed class, and then the view model sends a sealed class back to the view, and then shortly thereafter the view sends another sealed class back to the view model. So it's like it's literally like ping pong. And the usage of all these different abstract classes, like, suppose you're in the view and you want to like follow the flow of the data in the application. You can't do that just by like mouse wheel clicking or whatever other approach you use to that. Mouse wheel clicking in IntelliJ allows you to like go to the source code. You can't do that because it just takes you to the abstraction, like the abstract class or the interface. So yeah, there's other aspects of the design which are interesting. I don't think I'll go into those because I don't want to get too specific here. But yeah, it's been a very interesting, it's been fun to go through and actually document the architecture and start to ask myself, could I actually do this better? Because believe it or not, as insanely abstract as the architecture is, in my opinion, it for the most part works. We had some critical issues that we had to patch as a result of it. I'll give you one more piece of the puzzle. Almost the entire UI is modeled from a single UI state class, which is passed into the view via a pub sub setup, publisher subscriber. So you could be thinking Kotlin flows or RxJava or something like that, your own observer pattern that you've handwritten. And this is an interesting, so I should say, the entire UI of a screen is modeled from a single UI state class. And I believe this is something you commonly see with model view intent. However, the architecture in here is not model view intent. It seems to have some elements of MVI that have been retrofitted into an MVVM architecture. But yeah, this is one of the most interesting ones because having the entire UI, and in certain cases it's not the entire UI, which have been problematic cases, but trying to do this whole thing off of a single UI state class has some interesting side effects. Like on a certain level, it's kind of simpler. It's just one giant function that renders the whole UI in theory. But then you have to ask yourself the question, should every element of the UI be redrawn when a single field of that UI state class is updated? A follow-up, and the answer might be, well, no, but that's something you handle in the view. Or the answer might be, no, we shouldn't render the entire UI off a single UI state class. Different elements of the UI should be cohesively updated by potentially multiple UI state classes. That's more what I'm used to with model view view model, is like having a field for every widget sometimes, or every component of a screen. So anyways, the important thing with all these different approaches and with software architecture in general is you don't want to think in terms of what is the best architecture. You want to think in terms of what are the trade-offs of choosing a particular approach, because it's always trade-offs. It's always trade-offs. So yeah, anyways. So that's been an interesting thing, and we've got a meeting set up later in the week early next week, I think. And I'm just excited to get feedback from the other team members on what's going on. Anyways, I see Hemant is possibly still watching. And yeah, there's a couple people. So this is general programming Q&A. Oh, cool. This is general programming Q&A. I have been rambling about just stuff that I've been working on, like supporting Android 14 has been annoying as hell. And then, hey, what's up, Rutger? Yeah, and then I've just been rambling about documenting our team's app architecture, or the architecture that our main client uses, I should say. But yeah, if you have any general questions about programming or whatever, then feel free to ask me, because otherwise I will probably stop rambling shortly. And if you don't have questions, that's fine too. It's all good. So yeah, this is it's a fun little project to work on. I'm enjoying it because I enjoy software architecture. As I said before, it's pretty much my favorite subject, because it's kind of the thing that is easiest for me to think about in programming. I have a really good memory for like 3D high level designs. I just have a terrible memory for like syntax and things like that. Implementations, I'm not very good at remembering. That's just the way my brain works. Anyways, trying to think if there is anything else. Hey, what's up, Breens? I've just noticed there's a giant heart. Oh, okay. I can send hearts to people. Oh, we got a question from Breens, who has an awesome YouTube channel, by the way. I'm not sure if I'll be able to say anything useful here because I don't have a ton of experience with multi-platform, but I have some. If you were to build multi-platform app and use KMP, will you rather share UI for iOS and Android or implement UI for the specific platform? So last time I did it, 100% I would do the UI for iOS and Android natively, separately. So I was able to get, for example, Compose working on desktop and Android in a project. So JVM desktop and Android. And that was okay, but I was doing pretty basic stuff. And it was evident that if I wanted to do more advanced things, I probably would have trouble with that. Now, admittedly, this was like 2 years ago that I did that. I do see that Compose for iOS is in alpha. To be honest, I would still, just with the information that I have, I would choose to do it separately in iOS and Android, most likely. It depends a little bit on the project, but if there was anything weird going on, like a great example, if I had maps and in the iOS app we wanted to support Apple Maps or something like that, I would not be trying to get that working in alpha iOS Compose. Maybe it does work. I don't know. Haven't tried. But yeah, any level, like if the app is like pretty much just showing textual data or something like that, maybe some images, but not doing anything really fancy, then I would consider doing. I don't think I would consider doing alpha Compose because supporting like alpha builds sucks because you're out if you have the time to constantly update things, cool, but yeah, I'm basically talking myself into no, I would rather build the presentation layer. I would rather build the whole presentation layer in the native code base. But yeah, it's a trade-off. The more you do, obviously, in the shared code base, then the more effectively code reuse you have, the less code you have to write. But what I found, my experience was the more I wanted to do things in Swift, the more I wanted to share the Kotlin source in Swift, any sort of advanced feature that I wanted to use started to cause problems. Like if I was trying to get flows and coroutines working in the from the shared source set to the iOS source set, and getting coroutines working, there was kind of a way of doing that, but flows was like really weird. Again, this was a year ago, a little less than a year ago, that I was trying to do that for my ride sharing app. So yeah. Breen says I guess it comes as a trade-off. Yeah. Then Breen's comments, well, I guess you can read the comments. Hopefully that's legible, but Breens also prefers to implement the UI separately because users are used to a certain UI and UX for iOS. I didn't even think about that, but that's a very good point. Especially iOS wants you to do it their way. Like there is an iOS way to do user interfaces, and unless you plan on making the Android app look more like iOS, And they're like really, what's the word I'm looking for? If you actually want to publish to the Play Store, they are very draconian when it comes to following their requirements and standards. Yeah. Oh yeah. Breens brings up navigation in iOS. Holy crap! There was some tools to do that. Some APIs. Was it Navigation Stack or something like that? I don't know. And that was another thing I was trying to sort out in Swift UI setup with it, and it was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, this is insane. Anyways, I'm sure it was a feature, not a mistake. That's kind of the running joke I have about iOS development is whenever anything goes wrong or seems really weird, it's a feature. It's not a bug. Anyways, question from Andrew. How do you go about using styles and themes in Android Views apps? Well, all of a sudden we got lots of questions. I have some general things I would suggest for you. So if a set of styles is going to be reused across a variety, or reused across multiple widgets, pull those into a styles.xml file. Pro tip, doesn't need to be a file called styles.xml. It's not actually important, the name of the file. What's important is the tags you use and that you have it inside of the res values folder. So you could even, if you have a lot of styles, you could do like styles widgets, for example, and then just reserve this for like global application theming type stuff. So yeah, if a set of styles, like let's say you have a particular style you want to apply to text views, then yeah, I would absolutely pull that into a styles.xml file. If it's just a single widget that you're styling, though, I'm not generally going to pull that into a style, like a file, a separate file. I'll probably just code that right in the XML, because why make extra work for yourself? Some people would be like, no, you should do that every time. And I'm like, no, it's premature optimization. And I'm pretty lenient with this. What are some other things? For colors, consider choosing context appropriate names and actually for let's just say for resources in general, style resources, consider choosing context appropriate names instead of specific names. So let me give you an example. Suppose we have like color pink toolbar. Instead of doing that, do like, just color toolbar. And then that way, if you want to support light and dark modes, for example, you don't have to go back and rename this to like, yeah. This was a big thing I dealt with when setting up a dark mode version of the app, which is actually the feature that I just worked on for our client's main app, is supporting dark mode. And there were so many cases where it would be like color red in an XML file. And I'm given designs where in the light mode, yes, that background is red, but in the dark mode, the background is like dark gray. And then I had to replace all these things with like, instead of color red, it would be like color background primary. So this is a big tip, is consider context appropriate names that don't refer to like specific colors or specific things like that. What else can I say? So styles work kind of like CSS in that they can inherit. I'm tempted to not go into too much detail here, but you can have like a style. I'll almost certainly get the syntax wrong, but you could be like text view, or let's just say whatever, let's say title. Let's do that. And then parent could be like, I don't know, widget dot, I'm just making this up, text appearance dot whatever. And then let's just say I did something in there, and then let's say I wanted to do like title dot highlight. In the title dot highlight, because I've done this title dot highlight thing, it's going to inherit from whatever XML styles I had inside of title. Hopefully that makes sense. So there is an inheritance that occurs when you use this dot sort of thing. If you have any other specific questions for solving specific problems, then let me know. These are just like some general tips, but it's kind of a big subject, and it's easier if I can answer like more specific questions, or if there's a specific problem you're trying to solve. But yeah, hopefully some of that was useful. One of the last thing I'll say is like one of the reasons for pulling things into styles is just if you find yourself having to change, let's say you've got like a set of widgets, like you've got a button theme that you use in multiple different screens, and you decide to change how that looks, and then you have to go through each of those files to update it. That's generally an indicator that that's something you should have in a separate styles file, so that way you can update it at one place, and then it updates all the widgets that are using that style. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. All right. My friend here, I'm probably going to pronounce that wrong, so I may just say Syed. I probably pronounced that wrong. Sorry. Would you prefer MVVM or MVI? Plus, do you think implementing clean architecture is overkill for medium projects? This is really... I realize that to many people, this may seem like a pretty straightforward question. And I'm not saying it's a bad question. It's a good question. But it's actually a really vague question, because what one person considers MVVM and what another person considers MVI and what another person considers clean architecture, all of these things are actually more subjective than you may think, or maybe some of you have been reading people's opinions on software architecture, and you see that these things are actually, there's a lot of different ways to do these things. So what can I say in general? I don't think I can say anything. Here's what I would say. I am not a fan of over-engineering architectures for small to medium sized projects. What I will generally do is I will have some kind of a view model, and yeah, I'll typically use MVVM. MVVM is flexible enough that it can pretty well adapt to any kind of project that you need. There is a point where a project is so small that I may not even bother with MVVM. We're talking about really, really simple apps, but small to medium and large, MVVM is my go-to architecture with some caveats. I will potentially add in a class to encapsulate presentation logic. It'll take too much time to demonstrate this, but this thing effectively ends up looking like a presenter. So it allows me to pull logic that I want to test into an easily testable class, and then it kind of interacts with the view model in the view. So what it does is the view model sends it the data. It sort of calculates the appropriate changes to the data, and then it sends that change to the view model, which the view is observing. So that's one approach you could do. I don't know enough about MVI to comment much about it. My general impression of the architecture is that it's it's going to be one of those architectures that works well in certain situations and poorly in others, but I can't really say much about it beyond that. There's things about it, for example, my limited understanding of MVI is that the whole UI tends to be made of a single model, and there's some reasons why they like to do that. Something to do with like being able to have like a snapshot in time of what UI model is getting sent in. But yeah, my general preference is MVVM because I can manipulate it to the way I want it. Because there isn't really a strict MVVM architecture, in case you've been wondering. There really isn't. There's many variations to it. I don't know so much about MVI. It seems like a more rigid architecture, but without looking into it further, I can't really give you a good opinion. Moving on to the second part. Is implementing clean architecture overkill for medium projects? It depends on what you mean for clean architecture. Let me give you an example from my own code. I pretty much bring this this project up. So about 5 years ago or so, I was into clean architecture TM, and you'll see like app data and domain, and you'll see a lot of stuff. You'll see like interactors, which are dealing with lots of repositories and all that kind of stuff. So you'll see, so it depends. If clean architecture means lots of extra unnecessary layers of abstraction because reasons, then I don't advise it ever. If clean architecture means, you know, separation of concerns, cohesion, loose coupling, these sorts of things, then that should be pretty well, you know, applied in almost any architecture, any size of project, unless it's like really, 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 really small. So that's the thing. I don't know what clean architecture means to you. It means something different to a lot of people. Lately, for the past couple years, in Android, it has been largely considered to be like just kind of a joke. And I get why. Back when I was doing it in this project, I didn't really understand what I was doing. I was just copying something I saw and that looked cool and complicated, and I didn't. Later on, I would start to ask questions like, why did I bother doing this? What problems did it solve? And I'll close this question by giving you the thing that I tell everybody. Any architecture, tool, or approach should be applied only to the extent that it solves more problems than it creates. In my case, building admittedly, a note-taking app which had some remote data sources, but it's just a note-taking app. Clean architecture, as I applied it in here 5 years ago, did not solve more problems than it solved. It created some problems. So, yeah. Breens mentions, in my last position, I implemented clean architecture modularization in a client app that I was working on alone. I wouldn't recommend it since I found myself writing more code. Yeah, that's basically what I ended up doing in this project. Is I realized by the end of it, I just wrote a lot more extra code, and my attitude at the time was maybe the requirements will change. So it's like, and that was the arguments I was given from some people, is you need to be able to change your architecture over time. And my opinion is shifted on that. It's like, yes, you need to, I do I generally suggest these things. Separation of concerns. Don't do God objects or God activities. Put things together or separate them in a sensible way. You don't necessarily have to glue the entire architecture together with flows or RxJava or whatever, but you should consider doing that in certain situations because loose coupling is good. That's a little... Use loose enough coupling that the problem requires. And if you do these things well, you don't really have to get into like, should I be using interactors and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. Aitazaz, hopefully I said that somewhat well. Maybe the requirements change. Oh, message just disappeared. But maybe the requirements change in the future. Yeah, that was the argument I heard. And it's like, don't design your architecture primarily for things that aren't requirements right now. Satisfy the requirements at hand, the requirements you're given. And when those requirements change, yes, you can make those refactors. You can make things more abstract from there, but don't do premature optimization. Because optimizing prematurely for something that never happens is another word for a waste of your effing time, basically. All right, we have a lot of questions, so I may try to go through these a little quicker. So a question again from our friend Aitazaz. What do you recommend for Compose UI or XML for new projects? There's no single answer here. For new projects, probably Compose. But it depends. Does Compose UI support all of the UI requirements that you may need well? Great example, I built an app earlier this year, which was a ride-sharing app, and I built it in both Compose UI and XML. This was a new project, and the reason why I did that is Compose's support for Google Maps was not good at the time. It did not satisfy my requirements. Another example could be I found Compose support for web views to be a little weird. Not necessarily something you can't fix, and maybe they fixed it by now, but there's certain specific things that I would still prefer to do in XML. However, I'm quite happy to use Compose. But yeah, this is definitely a very much an it depends question. Ravi says, dang it. Hey, Ryan. Ravi did not say dang it. That was me. Hey, Ryan, hope you're doing well. Wanted to express gratitude for your working class Java and Sudoku Java FX project. I'm glad you enjoyed that. I put a lot of time and effort into making the kind of course that I wanted to have as a junior developer, and hopefully it was somewhat useful. Again, probably going to mispronounce your name. I apologize. I'll just say Georgie. Probably more like Georgia or something. Which is the best approach to ensure that a background or foreground service keeps running even when DOS mode kicks in? I'm trying to think. So you can't have a background service keep running when DOS mode kicks in, as far as I know. I don't think you can do that. Possibly with a foreground service that has the highest level priority. I think that's the only way to do that. And I'm not even sure you can do that. Yeah, because they just don't, they don't really want you doing that. And this changed again. Let's see, foreground service types. Yeah. There's just not a lot you can do. I think it's easier to stop the phone from going into doze mode um, than it is to deal with doze mode, because they don't really want you doing that anymore. Anyways, my suggestion here, read the documentation and sift through it. I don't remember off the top of my head, except I'm 90% sure you simply can't have a background service running when doze mode kicks in. For that, you might want to use something like Work Manager or whatever. And then as far as the foreground service, there's like, I think, different notification priority levels or something. And maybe in the highest one you can, like, urgent? Is that what it is? Anyways, whatever. Read the documentation is kind of my answer there. Rooker says, thank you for clarifying that architecture designs are subjective rather than objective. Yes, that's something which a lot of people don't understand is, and I didn't understand this for like the first 5 years of my career, is that if you ask developer A what model view controller is, and then you ask developer B what model view controller is, you might get some very different answers. And then when you really dig into the history of it, actually what model view controller meant 50 years ago, because most of these patterns were invented 50, 60, 70 years ago, when you look at that, you start to realize, oh, the meaning has actually changed repeatedly. So, and this is the case for all of them. I think it's less the case with MVI simply because MVI is only about a decade, maybe a decade and a half old. So yeah, architecture is a lot more subjective than people appreciate. And one thing also, another thing that people try to do is they try to make the project fit the architecture instead of making the architecture fit the project requirements. And I did that for a lot of years. And eventually, if you spend enough time building software architectures, you can start to tell pretty quickly when you're doing that, because all of a sudden you'll start to have to work around your architecture and do like these hacky things. And then that's a clear example of like, okay, probably the architecture is wrong. It's not really suiting the project requirements. Moaz says, hey Ryan, I'm learning Android development and your videos were useful for me, so thank you. You are very welcome. All right, we got a sort of a practical question from Moaz here. Sorry, it's kind of, I don't think it's, this comments thing is meant for me to be like copy pasting from it frequently. Anyways. Moaz says, I'm going to buy a laptop that I can use to work in companies. I don't know exactly what is the graphical requirements needed to seamlessly deal with a big and complex app or game that has a lot of animations and requirements. This one is tricky. So, yeah, let me give you an example. For my work, and I'm not bragging, I'm just giving an example. My company gave me a M2 32 gig MacBook Pro to do Android and iOS development. Probably that's going to be outside of your budget, or maybe you come from a rich family, or maybe you have a lot of money and you can afford that. More powerful is always better, but there are some workarounds. So for starters, if you have an Android device, you can test the apps on the device instead of an emulator. Emulators can be kind of powerful or require a lot of power. Obviously, the more powerful it is, the faster Gradle will sync and stuff like that, but that's also relative to how big the project is. I'm not sure what else I can say to you beyond that, because basically, yeah, I don't know what your budget is. I don't know what kind of apps you're trying to build. My general suggestion would be try not to spend, unless you're rich. Maybe you're rich. I certainly didn't have that luxury starting out. But try to spend as little money as possible initially. Try to get by with just the basics. And then once you start to make money, that's when you can spend a little more. Spend a little more on these sorts of things. But initially, try to work with the basics. Also consider options like JetBrains Projector, for example. If that's still a thing, let me just double check. Okay, apparently it's called JetBrains Gateway. But the idea here is that you could use something like, I'm not actually sure if you could do Android, how easy it is to do Android development. Can you do? Okay, so yeah, just consider looking at JetBrains Projector / Gateway. So the idea here is that even if you had a piece of crap laptop that just has a browser, you could hypothetically develop these apps on a powerful machine. Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that, Breens. So having multiple tabs open slows Android Studio down? What a piece of crap software. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Don't hate me, Android team. It was a joke. Okay. Wow, this Q&A started like really slow and boring, but it's improved quite a lot. Hi, Ryan. How are you? I am pretty good. Not bad at all. How much of data structure do you think is good enough for Android developers? The perfectly honest answer is that you don't really need to know any data structures or algorithms to like put pixels on a screen. So it is what it is. But here's what I suggest for every beginner. Know the basics of the difference between an array, a linked list, and a hash map. I love hash maps. They're cool. If you know these things, and so in Kotlin, this could just be like a list, whatever. We honestly, in higher level JVM languages and like JavaScript and stuff like that, you actually don't frequently use arrays, but understanding the difference between these, that's really what I suggest for you. I have an article. Where is it? Hop on over to Free Code Camp. How to learn the fundamentals of software engineering in a more interesting and less painful way. If you want to get started in software engineering, which is basically the formal study of data structures, algorithms, and the efficiency of programs with respect to runtime and memory space, jump into this article. You can ignore all of my personal narrative stuff and just skip ahead to this section here. And this will give you a basic understanding of what I advise for any programmer. Not like an absolute beginner. This is not absolute beginner stuff, but certainly like once you have your basic coding skills, I try to explain it in the simplest way I can. And it covers like what I consider to be the two core data structures, which is a physical array and a linked list. And then some basic algorithm stuff. So that's what I suggest. But yeah, in absolute terms, though, you really don't need to have in-depth knowledge of data structures to become an Android developer, because it depends a little bit on the app you're working on. But It's more important to know how to use retrofit, for example, than to invert a binary tree. um, all right. I lost my place. Right. Okay. So Moaz says, is getting the latest GPU going to make a difference, or is there a threshold that I need to have and everything? So the thing is, Moaz, without knowing what you're trying to build, I don't know. If you want to do Android development, I would say it's much more important to have a powerful CPU. If you're doing game development, I don't really do game development. I would imagine having a strong CPU and GPU would be useful, but I don't really know. But for Android development, having good RAM and a good CPU, I don't think a GPU is going to help you out that much. But I'm not a hardware expert. No es mi departamento, which is Spanish for it's not my department. Have you published or made an article about your own architecture? Have I published an article about that? I don't know. I feel like I probably did at one point or another. I have a video actually. Let me find something for you. So on the Android Worldwide YouTube channel, I gave a talk, I think 2 years ago or 1 year ago, where I explain how I approach software architecture. And through this talk, so I don't necessarily have a single architecture that I use, although this is basically this is bread and butter. I shouldn't use English idioms like that. This is like classic Ryan architecture, you'll see here. But I explain how I approach software architecture because to me, there's different kinds of logic. I also crap on 3 layers frequently. Yeah, anyways, I suggest this talk. Let me get the shareable link. All right. Apparently YouTube has been watching for about 5 years. That's awesome. 5 years was about when I started to not totally suck, but I've definitely come a long way since then. Okay. Harshit says, hello, brother. What's up, bro? Is it possible to get a job remotely from Asia? I have knowledge of HTML, CSS, JS, and React JS. So the answer is yes. Strictly to what you're asking here. Is it possible to get a job remotely? As far as how easy that is, it could be quite difficult. I work a remote job. I live on the west coast of Canada, and the company I work for is based on the very other end of Canada, the east coast. I've never lived in Asia nor tried to find a job remotely in Asia. I think the only thing I could help you with is I did 2 videos recently. Let's see here. So I did 2 videos. This was back when I had my braided beard, by the way, which I cut off recently. So this video talks about everything I suggest. That's not what I wanted to do. Everything I suggest for, finding jobs, writing introductory emails, having good expectations. So I suggest this video, and then there's another one which is how to do well in coding and technical interviews. So I suggest you consider looking those videos up. And then to answer your question, yes, it's totally possible, but it could be quite difficult. And then how to make that process easier, watch those 2 videos is basically my answer to how to make yourself more likely to get a job. The main thing I can tell you right now is expect to write many applications and get many rejections. That is normal, but you got to do it. The more places you apply to, the more opportunities you're creating for yourself to practice writing applications, hopefully practice interviews and coding challenges, and you're just giving yourself more opportunities to potentially get hired. So you may need to go through that process many times before it will succeed. I certainly did. I've probably been in 25 Android interviews in the past 10 years. It took a while. All right. So, I'm supposed to work as a full stack Java developer, but can't seem to find a job as they're all looking for at least 2 years of experience. What project should I build myself to show the companies? And then I just finished school, so I'm a real beginner. So there's 2 parts to this. The first thing that I would say to you is ignore job requirement postings and just apply anyways. Just write the email, just apply. Ignore these things. If it's let me put it this way. If you're applying as a senior full stack developer, don't do that. That's a bit much, but intermediate, 2 years of experience, whatever, just apply. Even if you don't get the job, again, as I said before, you're practicing the skill of writing applications, you're practicing the skill of interviewing, and those are important skills to have. I got my current job because I did well enough on the coding challenge, and I did really well in the interview. I'm good at interviewing. So it depends on the type of interview, but yeah. And that is a skill I had to practice over literally dozens of interviews. As far as what projects to build, so have at least one basic functioning. It looks like you're a Java developer, and I presume you're talking about Java EE, Enterprise Edition, or something like that. Have at least one basic functioning note-taking app or to-do app, or maybe even a shopping cart app. Have something at about this level of complexity. Or the other thing you could do is think of an app you would actually want to use and build the MVP, minimum viable product, for that app. Do something like this. And it doesn't necessarily have to be super, in fact, it's just really the most important thing I can emphasize here is it's nice to have something online that you can point people to that they can use, but really minimum viable product. Don't, you can add to it over time, but just for the beginning, just get something up there that looks okay and satisfies the basic requirements. So yeah, that's really my suggestion there. I can't really suggest much other than that. But yeah, a note-taking app, a to-do app, or a shopping cart would be a good start, in my opinion. And then just send out lots and lots of job applications is really important. Okay, I'm not going to do too many more questions because I got to start work soon. I'm not sure if I'll be able to give a great answer to this question. So Omar asks a question about multi-module. So this is referring to Gradle sub-projects, also known as Gradle modules. I have a set of shared modules, core, network, and local. Which way do you prefer? Core module depends on network/local module, or the other way around? Core module depends on nothing. Data source modules depend on it. I don't think there's a clear answer here. So my experience has been when the core module depends on for example, let's talk about the network, the remote data source. My experience was that forces me to only have primitives in the network module. I can't have like classes that I've created in the core module present in the remote data source naturally. And that isn't a huge issue. It's mildly annoying. Like, one thing I would like to be able to do is sometimes there's like some core business logic or constants, for example, that I would like to define in the core module. But if the core module is depending on the remote data source, then I invariably have to map. I have to do like a mapping operation to translate them into the core module classes. I don't really have experience with the other way around, where the API, like the network and local, yeah, I don't know. I guess the advantage of doing it with the API or the remote data source and the local data source modules, the advantage of having those depend on core is that you could access the core, what's the word I'm looking for? Classes, entities. I guess the problem with that, yeah, I don't know. To be honest, I don't really have a great answer for you. Hopefully, so I identified one thing that I can find annoying but not a big deal is just that I have worked in an app where the core module depended on the remote data source module. And that was one thing I hated about it, is I couldn't use anything defined in the core module in the remote data source. And I like to kind of immediately map to things which I can use, like data classes, constants, enums, those sorts of things, because I like using enums in particular. So anyways, yeah, I can't give a great answer on that one. I don't know enough about the other way we're talking about to give a really educated answer there. All right, 2 more questions. Yassine asks, what's the best server-side language for an Android developer to learn? Probably. So to answer this part of the question, there's no such thing as the best language to do anything. It depends on your personal interest and your requirements. Probably Ktor with Kotlin is a safe option that will be easy to use. But does that mean you should use Ktor and you shouldn't use like whatever, like, you know, Java EE, or you shouldn't use Node? Not necessarily. It depends on like what I would ask you, Yassine, is what are you interested in learning? Or are you interested in learning web at all? Like web development, possibly TypeScript or JavaScript. I personally prefer TypeScript because JavaScript is like, ugh. But lots of great stuff has been written in JavaScript. So, yeah, I don't know. Depends on what you want to do. Okay, last question for the day. Thoughts on multi-platform, Android and iOS mobile development. What framework do you prefer? Anything better for new projects? So general thoughts on it. I like it. General thoughts are there's a trade-off, which looks like the more code you want to share, the more difficult things can become to integrate, particularly with the iOS codebase, because you're going to be probably using less things that you would normally want to use in the shared module. I mean, like fancy stuff like coroutines and flows. You can get those working, but my experience from 10 months ago is that they're a little... They require like some interesting compiler plugins, which are definitely not going to last very long. So what I'm trying to say is my current understanding of the support for sharing code between iOS and Kotlin is that it works. You don't want to make it fancy. And the more things you do in your iOS code base, so for example, if you're doing the whole UI in Swift UI or whatever the hell else, I guess you could do it in UIKit. That's going to be a lot easier than doing, for example, the whole UI in iOS Compose Alpha. So it's really trade-offs. We had a similar question earlier, and I would prefer to do most of like the presentation layer in Swift UI. And then as far as frameworks, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by frameworks. My general opinion would be try to stick with standard library as much as possible. Try not to use many frameworks, because the more frameworks you use, these frameworks will have to have some kind of support. Some kind of support or integration or compiler plugins to support the iOS code base. And whenever you have that going on, it's going to tend to be a little bit hacky, and it might not work as well as a native solution. So, yeah. But it's kind of a vague question. I tried using flows in the shared code base for the rideshare app that I was building, and that did not turn out well in the iOS code base. The compiler, you could get it working, but it was really hacky, and I had to try to set up multiple compiler plugins, which I appreciate the people who build these things, but there's just not a chance in hell that those things aren't going to become obsolete really quickly. So, yeah, better to wait. That's all I have for today. I've got 8 minutes until I'm going to start work. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. That was a funny live stream because it started out really slow, and then all of a sudden there was lots of questions. So I appreciate that. I will see you all probably next Monday and probably next Wednesday. Peace out.